Meeting of the Finance Standing Committee is called to order at 9:36 a.m. At this time, I will conduct a roll call. Alderwoman Finlayson.
Present.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Present.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda with an added discussion item about the Spending Affordability Commission legislation?
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the agenda amended to include, what's the 01225?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Sorry, aye.
I just figured I'd give you the opportunity. All right. Moving on to Sarah. Motion to approve the minutes from the July 2nd Finance Committee meeting.
Motion to approve 7/2/25 minutes.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. We've got our supplemental appropriation. First one of the new fiscal year. Exciting. And it's my favorite kind of supplemental appropriation where somebody's giving us money. Love that. Boy, it seems like pretty important stuff. Stop the Bleed training kits for the fire department. We don't have to get any match, $2,500. It's a state grant. I don't see anybody from fire here to talk about it. Probably for the best because they got more important things to do than talk about $2,500. But I'm excited we have this. Anybody got any discussion on it?
Nope.
Seeing none, I will move approval of...
Mr. Chair.
Would you like to move approval?
Approval of SA 125.
I'll second it. I was just excited about it.
Mr. Chair, would you allow your committee to take their response?
Go ahead.
I'm sure Alderwoman O'Neill will second.
I'll second it.
And it is SA 126. I think it's miswritten here. We've got the new year.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. All those in favor of SA 126 say aye.
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 All right.
The control
That's a
number is
favorable
correct
recommendation.
on the document.
Yeah. I just saw in the attachment it
Yeah.
wasn't quite right. And then our first fund transfer of the year with our pals from Central Services. Thank you, Mr. Splinter, for being here. You want to come up to the mic to explain it to us? I think this one's a little more bigger, more substantial than the last one. So it's adding an administrative assistant. Am I understanding this correct that what we're doing here is moving the administrative assistant position from the city manager's office to the Central Services office?
Yeah.
So what's the logic on that? Why or how come?
So I'll speak to the city manager part of that. As you know, that position has been approved in the last couple of budgets by council. It has been unfilled because we don't actually have a place to put that person. And that remains true. So I'm not starting a hiring process. Until space issues are resolved, I'm probably not going to be starting one. So it's an approved position that's frankly sitting there. Central Services has a clear and present and immediate need and an ability to actually hire it right now. Having it sitting vacant, doing no one any good in the city manager's office doesn't make sense to me. I checked in with the other folks in the city manager's office, the mayor's office, to make sure no one had any issues with doing this. Everyone thought that it was worthwhile for that position to actually get used. And so we volunteered it to help fill out. Kind of knew that there were going to be some gaps in Central Services because, of course, it got created without any administrative staff specifically dedicated to it. So pretty high likelihood that we were going to end up needing to add staff there anyway. This just gets that to them earlier and frankly, I think makes better use out of that position.
Interesting. Mr. Fleming, you want to give it to us from your side, or did Ms. Buckland kind of cover it all?
Turn your
Can you
mic
get your
on.
mic? Oh, that one was broken the other night. Sorry, swap to the other one. Yeah. Isn't Central Services supposed to be getting on that? Come on.
I'll flag it. Thank you. Sorry. The city manager, I think, described the situation perfectly. We're grateful for all of your help. You gave us a fleet analyst position in fiscal year 26 that we're moving to fill hopefully in the very near future. And thanks to the city manager, if this position gets added, we're planning to fill them right away to bring administrative support to the department to help with invoice processing, payment processing, payroll, timesheets, all of that paperwork and admin function that the other departments have. So we're looking forward to starting that up as soon as possible.
I saw Alderwoman O'Neill's hand first, and then Alderwoman Phillips, I see your hand too, but we'll start with you.
Thank you. I do have one quick question. Will this be a permanent move, and will we change the org chart to reflect that?
Yeah, I'm not. I think yes to answer both of those. I think sort of the other question that I think I'm maybe reading into what you asked is, should you expect to see us sort of ask for that position back?
That was my question.
In the next fiscal year. And the answer to that is I actually don't know. We've obviously been operating without that position for a long time. Everybody's a little bit different. I personally don't tend to be a super heavy user because I'm weird and like to be independent. But we've obviously got a new administration coming in, and I don't know what that is going to look like. So I'm not going to make any assumptions about what the need potentially could be. At this point, I'm not anticipating asking for that position back, certainly not back from central services in the next budget cycle until and unless I have a very clear idea of what exactly that position will do.
That's good to know. I think it's important to note, and for the public to note, that it's not that we're maybe adding another position, that we're simply moving a position from one department to another, and that it would go through the regular process of asking for and budgeting for a second position in the future.
If I may, on that question, I'll just add one thing. And I firmly believe if we were able to get this position with the fleet analyst position, I think that would fulfill our department needs for our administrative staff. So I also don't anticipate coming next budget year and asking for even more administration positions.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. When we created the city manager position, it was with the idea that we would create more of a department, not a one-man operation or two-person operation. And over the years, we have seen the amount of work that comes through that office, I'll call it, for lack of a better description. I would hate for us to not consider all of what that department or that position does. Ms. Buckland, you have taken on a tremendous amount of work, not just because, we lost the city manager and you've been acting and you were the deputy to begin with. All of that falls on your shoulders. And we have a responsibility to not do that to anybody. And so, like I said, the original intent was to have an office that had more than one person, to have an administrative assistant, to have other staff that would carry on some of the responsibilities that are in the city manager's office. The city manager manages every department in the whole city, except for the law department. That's a tremendous amount. And where we may not be in a position to define, because we are changing and we are new, I want it on the record that that position belongs in the city manager's office. And I'm not going to oppose this move because it's needed, but I would like, and I was a strong proponent of adding central services to our program. I was here when we had central services, and when we eliminated central services, and when we brought back central services. And so I understand what is needed in that department to a limited degree as a non-professional. But I think we need to keep the line of communication open so that we can provide central services with what they need without diminishing the city manager's office. Okay. And I think central services, and Mr. Dinner, you're very new, is still defining what you need with your staff and programmatically. And so it's hard to say that this is going to satisfy your need right now. And it may right now, but we need a big picture on what is needed to fulfill the mission of that department. So I'm going to support this, but I want it to be very clear that that position belongs in the city manager's office. And if central services needs a position, then you've got to put things in place so that you can get the additional staff that you need. But we're not going to diminish the city manager's office.
I appreciate that. That sentiment is part of why I wanted to make sure I talked with everyone, to make sure that they were comfortable with that wasn't just in my head, that we needed to have agreement. So I appreciate the sentiment. Thank you.
We have an excellent staff, and they will work until they can't work anymore. And they will live up to the expectations that we have set. And so, of course, no one's going to say, yes, we could use all this help to do this, that, and the other. But they still may need it, but they are to be commended because everyone works to their maximum capacity for us. And like I said, we're very fortunate to have staff who are so committed. So thank you.
Thank you. If I may, I'm also appreciative of the recommendation to look internally and figure out what we need and be really strategic next budget cycle when we come around and ask. And as the city manager and finance director know, we're already talking about these things. And I'm probably going to come to you in the new year and you're like, no more positions, Matt. You're getting all you're getting. So I'm looking forward to working with you in fiscal year 27 on that. And we'll do our due diligence and come with information to potentially add additional positions next year.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I just wanted to say before we go any further on this topic, sir, I'm guessing you're here for our supplemental about the fire department.
Yes, sir.
We already approved it. Thank you guys so much for your good work.
Appreciate you all. Thank you all.
Have a great day.
So my question, Mr. Flinner, is just say 6 months from now or 9 months from now, sometime before the next budget, or even in the next budget cycle, we think, okay, city resources are limited, but we want to, but for one reason or another, the need is now greater in city manager than in central services. And let's say we have resolved the space constraint somehow or another. I know I'm throwing out hypotheticals here, but how do we make sure that whoever gets hired in this role is able to, in that situation, then get moved over into the department on a personnel level, right? How do we make sure that as you're looking for somebody you can hire, that if that is an eventuality greater than 1%, 5% chance, something like that, that we don't hire somebody, probably 6 months later, we got to fire them and then go through a process to hire a different person with like 90% of the same skills. That's how do we make that possible?
I'll take a stab at that and you can jump in if need be. My inclination under that kind of scenario, and obviously I'm talking off the top of my head, is to have a conversation with Matt about sharing, not about yanking entirely. And so I think that I would, as you say, there's a lot of that skill set that's very similar, and I don't think I would want to lose the momentum of that person's learning, because there's a lot of it that translates like regardless. There's only so many ways to enter an invoice. There's only, so
Right.
many ways to do some of that. But if that ended up being the situation, my first inclination would be to talk about sharing, not about yanking entirely back.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And do we have examples of that where we have positions that are shared between two departments?
Actually, that is the situation right now with city manager and mayor's office. Is Martina serves both of us,
Right. Okay. Yeah. That
and
makes
so
sense.
we coordinate.
And Department of Public Works and Central Services are in the same position right now. Also, we're lacking in an administrative support individual. The Public Works team is currently lending their time and services to us to process our invoices and our timesheet. So if at any time the city manager needed to borrow or take that person, we would lean on Public Works for additional help or support.
Okay, makes sense to me. Well, I think it makes a lot more sense to, if we put the money in the budget, to actually put it towards what will make city services work better. And I appreciate the arguments from both sides. Anything from either one of my colleagues? Any discussion?
One clarification, is this a permanent move?
I was just going to add that I did add some verbiage on the description just so that it was clear that this is going to continue forward with future budgets until a deliberate move is made or an additional position is asked for. So the funding will stay under Central Services for next budget cycle unless a change is made deliberately.
Mr. Chair, I am not going. For that reason, I understand. I am not supporting what I. We can't build that up. So.
Feels to me a little less like we're taking it away from them and more like they're giving it away, right? It's not like we're trying to pull stuff out of the city manager's office. They're the ones saying this. First of all, this thing doesn't exist, right? We have not hired somebody. And secondly, let's give it away, right?
Well, we put that position in the budget for a reason. It may not be clear to the people who are here, but in the past, when we created this position, we had the understanding that the objective was to develop the office of the city manager. So at one time, we felt the need to begin to build that department up. So any opportunity to take that away, I think, is a decimation because it goes against the objectives that we had set out initially in creating that department. So maybe if folks that have not been here don't recognize the need, but I'm not going to support taking away what we had deliberately set up to enhance the office this evening.
Can I ask the city manager what is the status of administrative support right now? I mean, you were saying earlier you do not use it a lot, and obviously this position is not filled. But what for stuff like Director Flannery is discussing, getting invoices processed, how does that happen now? What extent is that impinging on your or other members of the office's ability to do really important work?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things. We've obviously added some positions in the environmental area. And so that work is a little bit more independent because they've got some additional resources there doing it. Office of Community Services is the largest volume of invoices and stuff like that. They also have done some rearranging and rethinking and they also are a bit more independent than I think have been in the past. There was more of that work that did in fact go to the administrative assistant at one point than goes there now. The other change that's coming, you guys are aware the city's been working on implementing NeoGov, which is HR stuff. That will include some time entry components that should be a lot easier than the time entry we do now. I'm not sure and that position, Martina does all of our timesheets for all of us. I'm not entirely sure what that workload looks like moving forward. That's what it looks like for now, but I don't know what that looks like moving forward. So kind of from the city manager's office, the two biggest pieces, they're a little bit more self-sufficient than I think they have been, which is part of why I wanted to check with them to make sure that wasn't just me, like thinking I see something from the outside that's not actually there. But I think also then why folks felt comfortable agreeing with that. Everybody is a little bit different, which is why, again, I think it also depends on what a new administration looks like and what a permanent city manager, how they envision that office functioning and stuff like that. That may change that answer. I don't know. That's what it looks like to me now. And so I felt comfortable with that and very clearly feel like at this moment, central services need is bigger than mine.
May I,
Yeah,
Mr.
go ahead.
Chair? Ms. Buckland, the environmental sustainability piece, the council has seen fit to create a deputy to handle that. So that doesn't really fall as a responsibility to you. We put the Office of Community Caring in the city manager's office. I mean, at one time, finance was in the city manager's office and the harbor master was in the city. It was like, this is where we put everything that we don't know where else to go. But what I didn't hear in your description was the department, because that is a big part of your responsibility as the city manager, to manage all of our professional departments. And I would have to wonder what their response would be. Do they feel the support out of the city manager's office? And I guess one question for you is, who is your administrative assistant?
Martina provides that support.
But she's not yours. She's in the mayor's office, is she not?
Correct.
So you're borrowing someone from the mayor's office to assist you in your office. And that was one of the interests that we had, that you should have your own administrative assistant. You should have your own research assistant to assist when we come up with all of this legislation that's got to be imposed. And I hate to use that word, but that comes to my mind at this moment. Who monitors that? We hear from the departments. I didn't even know that existed. We didn't know you all had changed the code. Somebody has got to be looking at those things for you as the city manager. And you're absolutely right. We don't know what's going to happen in December and what the departments are going to look like. But the mayor's office might not have staff that you can borrow when you need them. And so I contend that the city manager's responsibility is far broader than sustainability issues, which really don't fall under the city manager, or community services, which is something that we're very much interested in, but that's a small piece of the other departments with police and fire and OEM and central services and public works and planning and the like. All of that comes out of the city manager's office.
Yes, but more on the management side, not as much on the admin side. That ends up impacting scheduling and some things like that. but a lot of that ends up being a more personal interaction between me and fire chief and, director of planning and zoning. That the administrative load for that isn't as heavy as the management.
Well, when we wrote the job description for the city manager, we were looking for someone who had a ICMA certification, because then we knew that they would have a broad brush stroke of knowledge on all the departments, not just oversight, but having some intimate knowledge, and thus setting an expectation. And I'm not to say that you don't have these, that skill set and this responsibility, but that was our interest. We wanted someone, and that's why we selected Mike Malinoff, because he had been city administrator before we had a city manager. And he had been city manager in at least 2 other jurisdictions, and came back to us with the scope of knowledge that was broader than anyone else could imagine. And he brought you in with the same level of commitment and professionalism. So I don't want us to lose that piece of it. That is very important, at least to me, as the sponsor of the legislation to create the city manager, that we want to maintain that professional level of interaction with all of our department heads. They all work for you, in essence, and not just as an interpersonal communication level, but on a professional level. So, thank you.
You got something to say? So this is not exactly germane to the legislation, but the conversation made me think about it. So Alderwoman Finlayson was talking about the importance of having staff in the city manager's office to help us implement bills. We added that position in this most recent budget.
We
Yeah.
added it to the council. Not to the manager, did we not?
I'm,
That was added to the council.
the mayor's budget included a additional position within the Office of Law for the council. The understanding was that it was more important for that position to focus on implementing legislation than to focus on drafting or administrative support for us. And so Alderman Savage's amendment removed that position from the Office of Law and added a position in the city manager's office that would support implementation of legislation. Did I get all that right?
That is correct. There was also the other position for the environmental program specialist, I think is the title,
Right.
in city manager. So they have 2 new positions that were added in this budget cycle.
So for both of those positions, then I guess my question is, where are we going to put them, right? If part of what we're hearing here is we can't fit the administrative assistant, how are we going to make that work?
So, to be perfectly honest, for I'm so sorry. For the legislative part of that, obviously I don't have a place to put someone within the city, the 4 walls of the city manager's office, the physical location. But work-wise, there is obviously a very strong crossover with the Office of Law. So honestly, my plan was to have a conversation with Mike Lyles about whether we could do some co-location, so that we could, fill that position and get the benefit of it, even if they're not physically located where we are.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. And God knows it's not a very far walk between the Office of Law and the city manager's office.
That's, yeah.
I'd like to.
Your mic.
Sorry. I'd like clarification on that position, because that could potentially change my opinion of this legislation. That position, I thought we had created as a liaison between the council and our legislation and the city manager for implementation. Am I correct in that? Okay. Where that person sat is questionable, I guess. Is that person in the law department, or is that person in the city manager's office?
Defined SAT.
Well, line of responsibility.
No, I know what you
You
really
know,
mean. It's just a question
Or-
between the literal and the figurative.
Yeah, organizationally, it's with the city manager's office. And so the intent, my understanding of council's intent for that position is largely on the implementation side and maintaining both a close relationship with council and a clear understanding of what fidelity to legislation looks like, and being able to both track that, do follow up, answer questions, not so much like a research associate for legislative development, but more of the after passage work. So having a close relationship and having communication between the city, between like me and that position, obviously very important. Them being physically co-located with us from the very beginning, I feel like is a little less important. And that we can, I feel like that's something we can work with.
So is your intent to fill that position in a timely fashion? And I hesitate to use that terminology.
Yeah, now that I'm back in the office, that's one of the things that's on my list, is to get moving on creating that, advertising it,
So will that person be able to supplement your need as far as administratively is?
If need be. That obviously wasn't the intent of council adding that to us.
Right.
But another, to a certain extent, all of us operate a little bit as all hands on deck if there's a need. And my expectation is that person would operate the same way. And so if we did end up having to lean on them, they would be available to help. I want us to be careful though about not having, not eating into the primary purpose of the position. So I do want to be careful about that, but you are correct. They would be able to help.
I would like to see us move away from all hands on deck,
Well, yeah.
because we always seem to be reacting
Yeah.
instead of preparing for.
Yeah.
And I think the position we created is vitally important, and I don't want to diminish it in any way. And so, Mr. Chair, I'm going back to my original position. I'm not going to support this. Sorry, Mr. Senator.
I'm going to make a motion for a favorable recommendation of FT 126.
I will second. Okay. All those in favor of FT 126 say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. FT 126 has received a favorable recommendation from the Finance Committee. Thank you for being here, Mr. Flinner. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about, what do we say it is? 01225. Messing me up. Right. 01225. So, yeah, we covered this the past two meetings, I suppose it was. But Alderman Arnett, we wanted to have you here because I know how much you care about this legislation. And I think I see, we discussed before, we do see some of the need on it, but also have some concerns around how it will work in practice. So I'll turn the floor over to you. We'll see how long it takes
All right.
before I turn the floor back from you.
All right.
But, go ahead.
Well, let me start off with my ask. My ask is that the committee make a motion to reconsider and postpone, or hopefully after my presentation, recommend favorably to this legislation. So very briefly, my history is as a professional economist, and part of that career was to make forecasts of national health spending. And also I was a member of the Clinton Healthcare Reform Numbers team, where we made forecasts of the impacts of legislation. So I would submit that I know a little bit about what this legislation would do. It is a long in the making. It spent years in a subcommittee at the FAC, and it also had some resistance from past finance director Bruce Miller, primarily because he didn't want it to get in the way of his budgeting, and it was a topic of discussion. Now, the name is something of a misnomer. The misnaming comes from how it is handled elsewhere, but it's really a revenue forecast. It's not spending, although certainly the forecast can also be used to look at future impacts on spending. So I think that gives it a lot of confusion. Is we're really talking about purchasing revenues for what we think are expected revenue growth down the road. It's used by the state of Maryland and virtually every county in the state. When Cynthia and I were creating the legislation, we looked at how the state and the counties handle it. And the way they all handle it is they create a committee that looks at spending affordability. That committee, and this is the 7-page advice from the spending affordability at the county, comes from a 25-page report from a group out of Towson University called RESI, which is a consortium of 5 different economic forecasting groups. The RESI's value added is to coalesce a consensus agreement about spending. So we have what I have here. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So all of those, there's paper. Those people have a separate spending committee. This legislation proposes that we put that function in an already financially advisory commission, the FAC, and may add it to their duties. We have 2 new members on the FAC who happen to be very good in terms of understanding both finance and economics, but it may still be the case that the FAC might need some more outside expertise to interpret the economics. There are no economists on the FAC. So the legislation basically says that the FAC would receive a report like this from some vendor to be determined, and they would come up with their evaluation. The forecast would also go to the finance department, the finance committee, the city manager, the mayor, the council. So we'll all know what the input is going to the FAC, but the FAC's value added is to do a synopsis and say how we see this affecting the city's revenue forecast. As I said, it'll also help us think about spending. So the things they look at are increases in wages, increase in costs, like inflation and so forth. Now, in the legislation, and probably because of my experience, I wanted to be fairly prescriptive about the things that would be expected to be opined on. That does not mean that they have to be opined on. For example, if you look, well, you don't have it in front of you. If you look at one of the pages and they have a forecast of, I forget, I'll just pick one, growth in the stability of the local and county economy. It will forecast on it, but suppose it doesn't give information on that, then it's not expected that the FAC will report on that. So I agree that I am being fairly prescriptive here, and I will own that it is because of my professional experience, but there is no other place to put that. The only place that I can see to put that is amending the facts charter, the three pieces of legislation. This would become the third piece. You can argue, as obviously the right of all the council members, to say that's too prescriptive. Now,
Can I interrupt you just on this point, Alderman Arnett? Because I think, as I understand what you're saying, you want to list out these things that you want it to do,
yes.
right? But you also totally recognize that some of them, in some cases, maybe won't be possible. Or maybe they will be, but there's a
Right.
possibility. So I'm looking at this particular part, the report components. But
Which
it
page?
just, page, support, whatever page you were just talking about, page
Yeah.
4.
For
Yeah. Right.
Why not just make it may instead of shall?
Pardon me?
Why not make it may
Well,
instead of shall?
That's why I'm asking you to reconsider and postpone. You, Harry, and I have talked about amendments that you would like to make, and I think that I subscribe to everything you've talked about. I just like the opportunity to make them. I'm going to be asking the same thing of economic matters this evening, but I do think that we need some specificity, and I'll tell you why very directly. Because other than two members of the FAC, I'm sensing confusion on their part about what the expectations are. And so I want to be explicit. These are the kinds of things we're looking for. These are the kinds of things that we want for help for particularly the finance department, but the city writ large. So what this legislation does primarily is authorize the creation of a spending affordability, which I would like to rename, function. We can't do anything about looking for vendors and things. I've researched there's at least 7 other vendors besides Resi that we could consider. I'm hoping we'll do Resi because they provide the information for the state and Anne Arundel County. But there are other vendors. So what this legislation does primarily is authorize this function, adds it. Now, I did hear testimony from the finance director at your last meeting, and I do think we need time to talk about it. The impact that I see for the finance department is that we will need a contract officer for the services, the project director, and that does take some time, and I think that that's something we need to consider when we consider the staffing and the budget for the finance committee, if and when this is passed and we get a vendor. But the primary responsibility for the value added, in addition to the report from the vendor themselves, is expected to come from the FAC. And that is the body that really looks at our financial situation and advises us from the outside. And I think it is the appropriate body, instead of creating a new spending affordability committee, that's the body where this should reside. I think there's some consistency there. I also think that this can have some value added in other places, which I hadn't really thought about. But I think in the new administration, there's going to be an expanded function for the audit committee. And it is expected that the audit committee will take a more detailed looking under the hood look, department by department, about spending and those sorts of things. And I think that this is also going to be valuable for that. So the primary function, again, is to advise the city on what the 5-year outlook is for our revenues from income tax, from property tax, all other sorts of things, even federal grants. It also will apply to things like 5-year forecast for the cost of doing business in the city. But I think it can help the planning department. I think it can help the audit committee. And that's why I have been laboring so long to make this happen. And again, returning, the ask of this committee today is a motion to reconsider and at a minimum postpone, so that any of the members of the committee and I, along with the finance department, can work on the refinements that you in particular, Harry, were talking about. So I hope that was short.
Yeah. Let me ask you one other question. Then I see you have your hand up, Alderman O'Neill. I feel like you've kind of touched on this, Alderman Arnett, and I'd actually like the Office of Law to weigh in here too. Why is it more appropriate for this to be an ordinance than a resolution? It almost seems like the kind of thing we could direct back to do without having to put in code that they have to do it always for all time.
Because it changes the code.
Well,
And the only way
yes,
you can change code is through an ordinance.
But okay, yes, I understand that. But my point is, we could theoretically pass a resolution that directs the fact to do something, to do this, without having it be something that changes code and puts that level of concrete.
Well, first of all, I take your point in the sense that we do fees and fines and comp in the budget by resolution. So I think that's a consideration. And again, I would be happy to talk about it, but we need time to do that. And that's why I'm asking for a reconsideration. I have to admit, I feel guilty, I guess. I let this fall a little bit. I should have written up the remarks that I just gave you and given them to you. I wasn't helpful, and I apologize for that. But I also would not like to see something that I think is a very important enhancement to the city being able to budget and plan. And but I mean, I do think it needs to be done by ordinance, but we do a lot of things with a lot of money that are done by resolution in the budget. I've never understood that, but that is certainly something that could be discussed if we have the time to do it.
Any additional feedback from the Office of Law? No. Okay. Alderwoman O'Neill, I saw your hand first, and then Alderman Finley.
Thank you. So I'm going to frame this in a couple of different directions. One, I had a conversation with Office of Law back last fall when one of our city commissions that we put together, and I asked the role and why we have a city commission, and I was told at the time by Office of Law that we have city commissions who hold people who have expertise in areas that councilmen may or may not have, and that it was up to those commissions to help make decisions, and that we needed to rely on those expertise. At the time, I was questioning the Port Warden's decision on not approving a plan that was both funded and supported by all of council and city. And initially, we appealed, so we ended up appealing. When I was voting against this favorable recommendation 2 weeks ago, it was mainly because I felt like putting this into code, making it an ordinance, tells us that one, our fact is or is not made up of individuals who have expertise in this position. And we're adding 2 layers. We're adding the Towson, and then we're adding the other report. So now we're technically hamstringing 3 layers of government by creating an ordinance. And maybe that's not the right way to frame it, but I felt like, do we respect and are we utilizing the fact in the way that we should be without this ordinance? And if we're not utilizing him in that way, then we have a problem with that commission, as I believe that we have a problem with some other commissions. We don't like what they say, we just ignore it and move on. And that's not the way for us to be treating volunteers who have expertise in. I felt like this was hamstringing our departments. Alderwoman Finlayson will constantly talk about the fact that we hire professionals. We expect them to do the professional job. We need to give them the tools to do that professional. And we heard from finance department, this would, in a sense, could be a hindrance to their job and their. So that was why I had initially gave it a non-favorable recommendation, because I feel like this goes almost too far in hindering those professionals that we have hired or that we have retained as volunteers to look at how the city is operating. That makes sense.
It does, and I actually have several responses. I'll start at the very top. I think we don't have the expertise we need in a lot of committees. We basically, even though we're now vetting them, thanks to Alderwoman Finlayson, through committees, we basically take whoever comes. And there are people on the fact that I think have been on the fact for a long time. They're nice people. I respect them. But we used to have Faye Curry on the fact. She was a banker. She had very direct. We still have Frank Brown, who works for FDIC. But I don't think we have economic expertise, and this is particularly an economic function. Now, in terms of adding a step, it is getting these forecasts, but it isn't adding. The fact is still existing, and the fact is still asked to opine on the budget, on the capital budget, and so forth from time to time. And they would do the same here. The timing on this, we can work on the refining of the time, but the timing is intended to get these kind of forecasts at the beginning of the budget process, not the end. But most importantly, and I would ask the finance director to speak to this is meant to be a help, a guide. It doesn't usurp or take away the power of the finance department to make the budget, but it is giving them some outside notions of what the future, the 5 years out. The budget is itself a forecast. It's a one-year forecast, but it has out-year impacts. And what this does by having a 5-year forecast is say, okay, this is okay for this year, but what could be ballooning up in the future? So it's really the fundamental reason for the fact and for this is to help the finance department. I've had long discussions with Jake in particular, but also Jody in the past. And at the June meeting of the FAC, I thought we got strong recommendation that from every FAC member and the finance director that we need this and we should go forward with it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's certainly going to have to be a procurement officer to get the contract, whatever it is. And that means an RFP is going to have to be put together unless there is a potential we could make a direct agreement. This is proprietary information. I should not have it. I got it anyway, but it's proprietary. It was paid for by the county. We can't have access to that unless we have some arrangement with the county. But if there are impacts that require more staff support, if there are impacts that require outside expertise for the fact because it doesn't have economists, and it doesn't, even with what's Peter's last name? It was, yeah. He is a accountant and CPA, but he's not an economist. And there is a big difference. And in fact, I know that difference.
There's definitely a big difference. Yeah.
Because as an undergraduate, I majored in both economics and accounting. So I know what the difference is. And this is important, I think. It's important information. It is meant to assist the budget making. It's meant to assist our thinking when we think about issuing multi-year bonds that are subject to interest rate fluctuations. For example, I'm dying to know what Resi is thinking about in terms of impact on inflation from tariffs. And I bet you they're all over the map, but that's something that's important to our future. And it's something that we don't have internally at this point, unless I'm wrong. That's not the kind of expertise. So this is not meant to add steps or be a hindrance. I don't think it adds any steps. It is the fact is supposed to be involved with the budget from the get-go, and they still are, but this would give them and us more information as a background predicate to the budget making. So again, you had several different layers there. I do think we need to be paying more attention about who are on our committees and boards and commissions. I do think we also have the right to ignore them if we, as the person who are actually the fiduciary responsibility, think they didn't get it quite right or they got off on a tangent. But yes, I think we need to have more strength there and maybe fewer of them. But in terms of the intent of this, it is to help the budget process all across the board, not hinder it, not add an extra delay or anything like that. It keeps to the same things. It adds an additional function for the fact, but it keeps to their same primary function, which is financial advisor. Sorry.
And do we have an idea of what an agreement with something like the 2 reports and the consultant? Are we talking $20,000? I don't think so. Are we talking $200,000? Are we talking, when we just had a 30-minute discussion on an
Yeah.
admin position,
Right.
and then we're talking about adding a consultant, a report. I
So-
think that it's our responsibility to,
Right.
take a look at that. How much are we adding to our operating budget?
Yes. So the answer is, if we go with Resi, and there were preliminary discussions with Jake and Jody, that it was a few $1,000s. Now, I don't think I would have liked to have been part of that discussion, because while our revenue sources are the same as the county, the mix is not the same. And the biggest source for us is the real estate, the personal property tax, and our mix of real estate is different than the county. There are parts of the county that are very much analogous, but they're different. The big difference is it's over 60% of our revenue, as opposed to 17% in the county. And so it has a huge impact on it. Now, it could be that the advisors will find that we're really pretty much the same as the county. Now, in terms of what it would cost, if we go out and do the research, and this is what allows us to do this selection, we can decide that it's too expensive. KPMG is one of the vendors. Deloitte is another. I'm sure KPMG providing this service is probably going to be $100,000. Deloitte is probably less, but could be big. And I called into the 3 other vendors that I was looking at seriously, and they want to have further discussions, which I think is inappropriate at this time. It's not my job to negotiate with them, first of all, but secondly, I don't have any legislation to stand on. There's no authority. So yes, it could be a variety of a range, and it could be a variety of people who are even willing to do it for us. But that's something we can't explore unless we pass this or some amended version of it. So really, this is the starting line, not the finishing. This is allowing us to vet the vendors, work out the arrangements that are needed within the finance department for staffing, and come up with a budget. At a minimum, I would say my sense of this is we're talking about $25,000 to $50,000 a year. Compare that to a $201.4 million budget. It's chump change as a part of that budget making process. And I don't even remember. I need to get the bigger thing from our bond counsel, but I think the last time I looked, we had $409 million worth of bonds. So we've got some big chunks of money that this could shed some light on. And I think it's money that is worth the effort. If it gets to be a big number and it goes to the finance committee on the budget and you say it's too much, we can't support that at this time, then we suspend the operation. But we can't start without this, in my view.
And I think that was one of the right. Get to you. I think that was one of the points that I had made when we considered this before. The FAC asked for an amendment that said something along the lines of, "We don't have to do this if you don't give us the money to do it," and that would be a good amendment.
I think that's our right to tell the fact, not the other way around. If we put this in code and a responsibility, now the FAC can say, well, we'll give you a report based on the support that we have in the information. The report is still going to be, we will have this in our hands. We will be able to look at this outside expertise. The FAC's value added is they're at arm's length. They're out there, and they may or may not need, particularly with the two new members, they may not need counsel. Here's the members that are on the county one. It's the county executive. Julie Hammer was on this one. The finance administrator, Christine Anderson, Chris Trombauer. They're basically members of the county administration or elected officials.
So I know we do have a hard stop today. I want to make sure Alderwoman Finlayson has time to go over this and talk about any questions. So floor's yours.
Well, I do have a couple of questions. Ms. Moran, in the confines of your role as finance director, would you have the authority, if a need arose, to access this information, to access a consultant and to seek out the information that we would need?
Can you further explain that? What do you mean authority to?
Well, you're the director of the department. If you need additional information in planning our budget and forecasting for us, if you don't have the information that we might need or you feel we need, could you go outside and bring in a consultant to help you gather that forecasting?
We would need money to hire a consultant, but yes, we right now use the resources that we have without using a consultant to create a forecast, revenue forecast. Talking with the county, talking with local jurisdictions, following legislation. We do a number of things to bring this information in. For what it's worth, I don't disagree that having another set of eyes is ever not beneficial, but my concern with this restriction or restrictive ordinance is that there's a lot of things to iron out before this is written into code of how things should go and how restrictive it is. From my understanding, and I was also not a part of that conversation with Resi, but they did not want to take on the city in the fact that we do have we are very different from the county. We're not, there are some things that overlap, but I don't think that the added value that even the FAC is looking for is going to be done by just utilizing something that's an overarching county approach. I think we would need to find out if there is a consultant that can actually add value as it pertains to our city and not just the county. If not, I think we could just look at the county's report and get information we need with their consent. But I just, I think the timing of it is restrictive. I think it would be better suited if council decides that they would like a financial consultant or economical consultant to look at a report in this matter, that it would be done as a deliberate decision of not an annual thing. Maybe we do it however they see fit, but adding consulting money or funding to the finance department, as we would be the owners of the contractor anyway. And this would be a huge burden on us in the fact of time, bandwidth. Their report's only going to be as good as the information we give them. And I just think there's a lot of unknowns to that. But in whole, I'm not disagreeing that it's never not beneficial to have another set of eyes that's a professional economist or, consulting company. But I think there are a lot of unknowns. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. And what you've said, to make it briefer, is you could bring in consultants that would provide us with this same type of forecasting as needed.
With budget authority,
Which,
yes.
we're understanding
Yes.
that we would pay
Yep.
for it. And so for for me, that's another concern about the legislation is the fact that you already have that ability to do that. And you just mentioned how frequently would you need to forecast, every 5 years or surely not every year, because I don't imagine that things change that significantly.
They do.
Well, in the climate that we're in now, absolutely. But anyway, my second question has to do with the fiscal impact note. More and more we're getting fiscal impact notes that don't say anything. And the reality is that there is a fiscal note to be attached to this. And at least we should have a range. If it can't be pinpointed to an exact amount, it may cost us upwards of $100,000, let's say. I'm just throwing that out, not to frighten anybody. But, upwards of $10,000. But we need some numbers, not just the finance department and Mr. Trudeau telling us that we don't know, or right now it's not going to cost us anything. Well, that's not what a fiscal impact note is supposed to do. It's supposed to help us to understand what the costs will be in the event that we pass this legislation. So putting numbers in are extremely, I know it's hard, requires research, but that is the purpose of the fiscal impact note, to help us understand what it's going to cost so we can plan, so we can plan. So that was my second question. But I am prepared to make a motion to reconsider and for the purpose of giving the alderman an opportunity to fix the things that I hear. The chairman has met and he's got some ideas. The finance director has some ideas and she needs to be included in these discussions. The law department needs to be brought in. But I would rather give the alderman the courtesy of an opportunity to fix what's wrong with this legislation so that it can move forward. So I move that we reconsider, and being on the prevailing side, I think I can do that. That we consider our action on, what was it, 010,
012.
012, 25.
So just so I'm clear, so this would then come back to us on the September 3rd. That's what we.
Well, if we would say that, but right now, if we vote to reconsider, we can continue the discussion and talk about when we would take the next action.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense to me. All right. So motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor of reconsidering the Finance Committee's recommendation on 01225, say aye.
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 Now,
Motion carries. So did you have another motion you wanted to make?
No, but I was going to kind of give us some parameters that we would ask the alderman to, get together with all those people who have had concerns and bring it back to us at the September meeting.
I think that's certainly very feasible.
Yeah. So I think there were two good suggested amendments from the FAC. I would throw in what I said today about making this a may include. And then I think we'll hear from the finance director if there's some additional suggestions. And we heard a couple other ones today. So with that understanding of what's going to happen, is there a motion to postpone 01225 to the September 3rd meeting of the finance?
I'll move we postpone action on 01225 until our September meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Mr. Chair, I'd like to add that we request a updated fiscal impact note for this legislation.
My feedback on that comment is just that this happens a lot with legislation, and we don't have all of the pieces to give a proper fiscal note. And I don't know, that's a council conversation of whether it should be considered without any true fiscal note. But we do what we can with information we're given. So right now, we don't know what that's going to cost. We don't know what consultants are even willing to take on the city. So at this time, we don't have a projection for you. So I don't know if that means that council wants to table things until we have a financial impact. That's not for us to decide, but we just present what we have at that point in time. So for this one in particular, we don't know because we don't know what options are even out there.
So
well, I think what we're looking for is, at least what I'm looking for, is at least some information, some ballpark idea, instead of saying we don't know. That's not an answer in my mind. The county has hired a consultant, and I understand we have connections with the county, so we can get some sort of parameters. But to simply say we don't know is not helping us with the legislation, any piece of legislation.
So my thought on this is, rather than have it be a fiscal impact note that has to go through a bunch of processes, Alderman Arnett, you mentioned that there were, what'd you say, 7 different vendors?
At least.
Could you, in the next month and a half, I guess, try to get some potential quotes? Again, it sounds like you're just looking for broad parameters.
I am,
right?
yes.
I think it would be more appropriate if I work with the finance department. I don't have agency to make those kinds of negotiations, but I can certainly sit down with the finance department and tell you the vendors that I've discovered, and we can figure out and get a range. It's probably going to be a pretty big range. I know KPMG because I've had them under contract. They are very expensive.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to pay them the money that they're paying for this when we know it can be done for much less money and much more domestically. But I would volunteer to work with Brittany and staff to lend my expertise on where I've.
Well, let me ask Mr. Moran, I mean, are you in agreement with our need for more parameters with the fiscal impact note?
I agree with that along a lot of legislation lines, that we need some more fiscal details. If it's something that really pertains to a fiscal impact, we should probably have all that information before it's brought forward.
Well, and we said that legislation shouldn't come before us without all of the significant pieces, the fiscal impact note, the staffing impact, and then whatever committees, planning commission or whatever. So by all means, if it means holding up a piece of legislation until we get it, then we do that.
It gives us a little heartburn too, to have to say we don't know. So
Yeah. Thank you.
So I think we're clear on what needs to get done between now and September 3rd. We need an update on the money, and we need to figure out what some of the amendments would be. Those are the big things. So with that, we'll move on to our last item on the agenda, which is just an update from our finance director. How are things going over in your world?
Now that we
They're
put more
okay.
work on her.
we're
Hey, that's a lot better than the last time I asked. I think your answer was pure chaos. when we asked you
it's still
before.
that way. We're trying to manage a lot of things going on right now. Just busy, but we're good. We're trying to work on improving a few processes. We're getting settled in from the budget wrapping up and trying to still finalize all of that with position control and bringing all the departments in to know what they actually were approved for in their budget and getting it uploaded and running, and already starting our notes for fiscal year 27. I spoke with Alderwoman O'Neill about a few changes we're trying to make with utility billing and just trying to improve our processes and make things easier for council, departments, residents, all of the above. So we are working on bond ordinance, as you're aware of, to kick that off. We have started our audit already, a kickoff of our audit. We have a meeting today internally to go over audit delegation and utilizing our consulting services right now to train our staff on what they can take on the audit to, in hopes, get it out before December 30th. So, just busy.
Do we
Anything?
have written reports? I'm looking at what's attached and it only goes back to March. Should we have April, May, and June attached? Okay.
Happy to provide a document in the future if you want a formal Word document of an update.
Okay, that would be great. It just looks like you all stopped working in March, and we know that that's not
Wishful thinking, right?
right. Thank you.
Is there any additional items for discussion?
I do have a question. How is it working with you guys across the street? I mean, you're out of this building, not in total, but running back and forth, or is there a need? How's it working out? That
You mean with budget across the street?
just in general with the department.
So we are all still here, minus Jake and the 3 other budget people. They're over there.
Across the street, yeah.
It's not ideal, but it's okay. We're supposed to be moving to Shaw Street as a whole, all of us in one spot, billing, accounting, everything. So that's but it's a conversation we're having and who's going where. But we definitely need finance to be together with some meeting space, and it's been a little challenging, but it's okay. They're right across there. We can walk.
And that's why I'm asking. Because again, we've put another level of responsibility on your plate by dividing your department. And we need to be made aware of that. And the fact that when you move to Shaw Street, you'll have a better advantage with everybody under the same roof. And you'll be able to count on the city manager to help you.
Yes, and we also have 3 free and 1 contractual positions open right now, but we don't even have anywhere to put them. 1 being a deputy.
Mm-hmm.
So
Kind of important.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you all being here.